Yes, nerds, it's that time of month again. We are going to talk about sci-fi. This time around, we will be discussing the villains of Star Trek with Lars Di Senza of the Treknicity podcast. So, stay tuned and let us know, what's your top 5? Stay tuned for more. I'm Richard.
And I'm Will.
And together we're
The Irreverent Nerds. Bum, bum, bum.
Nerds, nerdettes, and assorted nerd people. Will and Richard here to talk about Star Trek. And Will, I don't think you and I have talked about Star Trek yet. You were supposed to be here the last time that our guest for this episode, Mr. Lars Di Senza, was here. And I forget why, but you weren't able to make it. But you're here tonight. So you and I are going to talk about Star Trek for the first time.
I haven't consistently watched the Star Trek since Voyager had new episodes, so I'm not very knowledgeable.
You're not in the know. You're not in the know. Well, we're going to jump right in and go ahead and invite Lars to join us with video and audio. And just a little bit of background. Originally, this was going to be recording with another guest as well, Lars, and then Holodeck 4, whom we are connected with on Instagram. And she's been a supporter of our Instagram page and our podcast from the very early days. And Lars also has been a supporter and is still, our monthly supporter, the one.
Thank you.
We'll get there. We'll have more, but Lars has been a very gracious supporter of the podcast, and we had him on previously to talk about the episode Iborg, and that was a really good episode. By the way, Will, if you haven't listened to it yet, you need to go back and listen to it. I know you weren't there for it.
Yeah, I actually sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I thought we had a really good discussion in that episode. That was really enjoyable, and so we wanted to have Lars on again, and Lars, for those who haven't watched that first episode, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, particularly in the podcasting realm?
Yeah, well, I am one of the founders of the group, the Red Shirt Geeks, which was a loose Star Trek reference, which then took almost a literal meaning, as well as I wanted to do a Star Trek related podcast because we never had anything specific where I could talk about my favorite topic, which of course is Star Trek. So I started a show called Treknicity, and I'm just rolling out season 6 right now, and that's kind of my bag. That's what I'm doing right now. I spend little time I have talking about Star Trek, and of course playing Star Trek Online during our Old Men Gaming shows and streams on Sunday afternoons.
I understand you're a Trekkie by night and a techie by day. Yes,
I am. I am an IT professional now, officially 25 years in the business.
Nice.
And
congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. It's one of those things where having a technical mind has allowed me to be successful in what I do. But at the same time, I'm a creator at heart. And the idea is that I stretch my creative legs by talking as much as I can about Star Trek.
Do you feel like that you're leaning towards, technical mindset? Do you feel like that's part of what attracted you to Star Trek?
Star Trek for me, as most people will tell you who are fans of Star Trek, a lot of it comes from a childhood where either one or more parent was into it. In my case, it was my father. So I kind of got put onto it from him. And then, growing up, I was not the most popular of people. So Star Trek was always an escape where, because of its background in inclusivity and acceptance, It was a place where I knew that no matter what I was, who I was, what I looked like, how I sound, where I was from, it didn't matter. I was going to find a way to fit in.
Well, Will, since you and I have not talked about Star Trek before on the podcast, do you remember how you first got into Star Trek? You mentioned you watched quite a bit of TNG, some of the old series. Did you stumble on it by yourself? Did your dad watch it? Like that was the same for me. Like I got into it because my dad was into it. How about you?
Oh yeah. Well, I was born in the mid '80s, and so Star Trek: The Next Generation, is what is the series I was introduced to, and that was one of the things that my family watched together. Our family time often revolved around the television, and so we would always catch every new episode of Next Generation.
Yeah.
Nice. As a family, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Actually, that is pretty cool.
I don't remember my mom ever watching with my dad and I. That's not her thing.
I always have this, like, I want to tell this fantastic story about, like, hey man, how'd you get into Star Trek? Well, one day I was in the wrong part of town. There was a guy there with like a long trench coat. He's like, "Hey kid, come here, man. You want to seek out new life, new civilization?
Want a bootleg DVD?
That's how we got the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Or a bootleg VHS.
Yeah, we shall not talk about that holiday special that doesn't exist.
Oh,
yes.
I have to admit, I finally watched it. It was infamous. I've heard about it all through the years. I finally watched it this past year, and it was so bad I kind of enjoyed it actually. And the Boba Fett cartoon in the middle is actually pretty cool. I think it's the middle.
Yeah,
well, yeah, it definitely got weird.
There are definitely two things I can say that I've always taken away from that special that I always would stick with me. B. Arthur, Art Carney. Like, I mean, it was like Star Wars became a sitcom.
Yeah, that's
all you
that's
needed
pretty
was
fair.
the canned laughter.
And I didn't catch the very end where Carrie sings, but apparently I heard that the only reason she'd agreed to do it is because she wanted to launch a singing career. Apparently,
yeah, that sounds about right.
We're getting off topic here. We're here to talk about Star Trek tonight, and like I said, originally it was going to be the women of Star Trek with Holodeck 4, who is a woman, and she was going to join us, but that will be for another time. So tonight we're going to have a general topic of Star Trek villains, and given that this is very impromptu, this could go anywhere, but that's our general topic. And before we get in too deep, I got a couple of sources here just to give us some ideas about which villains to talk about, and obviously the ones that come to mind. But sometimes I forget the names. I can remember like the stories and the faces. But I'm looking at Nerdist.com, and they have gone through and ranked both from the series and the movies. So just a quick rundown. We got Seska from Voyager at number 13, Harry Mudd at number 12, Nero from the Kelvin timeline at number 11, the Dura sisters at number 10. That's just to give a few example. The Borg Queen is only 8 in their ranking. Q number 7. They got Wayun at 6, Kruge from Star Trek 3 at 5, Kai Wynn at 4.
Yeah. Commander Kruge. He was a bad one.
Just waiting for him to be like, Marty.
Yeah.
This is played by Christopher Lloyd.
Wait a minute. Doc, you tell me you built a time machine
to the future
out of a bird of prey?
And of course, the number 3, they have General Chang from Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country. Number 2 is Khan Noonien Singh, and they have their number 1, and this is Nerdist.com, as Gul Dukat from Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, he was particularly bad, but I don't know if I agree with him being the worst. I would have definitely put Khan, although to be fair, Khan was very two-dimensional. So I guess I could take that. I could run with that.
Obviously, they had a lot more time to flesh out Gul Dukat, and then you had the basically continuous storyline with DS9 as well, which you didn't necessarily have with, like, you had some repeat villains like with TNG, and I can't, maybe the original series. I'm not sure, but like you could probably tell me better than I could. But yeah, with DS9, they really got to flesh him out. So I could see that. I could see that. But
well, how did we feel about J.J. Abrams' Khan? Wasn't he played by Cumberbatch?
Oh yeah, Benadryl Cumbersnatch. I'm sorry, yeah, I could never get that guy's name right.
yeah,
Actually, in all seriousness, I am a big fan of Benedict Cumberbatch, an amazing actor. However, his role as Khan was, one, the worst kept secret in Star Trek, and two, the worst reveal in Star Trek. I mean, there's a wonderful video that came out right after Star Trek Into Darkness where they talk about how Star Trek Into Darkness should have ended, and it was an animated version. And
how it should have ended.
You have Kirk and you have Spock and you have McCoy, and they're like, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Captain Kirk. This is Spock." McCoy. He's like, "Yes, but my name is dun 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 Khan." And they're like, "Okay," and they're like, "He's like, yeah, right. I'm Kirk, Spock, McCoy." He's like, "No, but you don't understand. I said my name is dun 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 Khan." And he's like, yeah, we get it. Like, and then he keeps going on about it, and they basically, he's like, but somebody just put him out because they had no idea who this guy is. I mean, because in Star Trek Into Darkness, the events of the original series episode Space Seed had never happened, so they have no idea who this guy is, and they played on it so much in Into Darkness. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's the baddie. He is Khan. He's the worst villain, and he's Kirk's nemesis. Yada yada yada. And like, you guys do realize that he hasn't met him yet, right? He has no idea. You realize that it's not for like another 15 years in canon that this guy comes back to get his revenge, right?
Now, I will say, as in terms of Kirk's in that film, Kirk's intro to Khan, like, you talk about setting up some emotional weight. I mean, he comes in, he shoots up Star Trek Command, and kills Kirk's mentor. So like, yeah, talking like vengeance right off the bat, so definitely gave some pathos to it right away. But at that point, like you say, he didn't even know that it was Khan. Not that he would have cared, but it's like,
right. I mean, you could take the actions that or the events that happened in the movie as and influence how he felt about this guy, but the filmmakers were leaning so heavily on this being the worst like the ultimate matchup between these two guys who are blood enemies, and it's like they haven't even met yet, so you can't bank on that. You can take what you got in the movie and you can run with it, and you can chew it up, and you can regurgitate it out how you want to set all this up, which is fine. That if you just stayed with that would be great. But you lean so heavily on the weight of these two characters' relationship from a previous setup.
Mm-hmm. So who would we like? Let's say strictly, like, not necessarily taking the movies as a whole, but more of like the individual performance of the actors. Who would you say did a better job, like Ricardo Montalban or Benedict Cumberbatch?
Well, if I can, I would definitely say that Ricardo Montalban played the character better, because from what we know of Khan as a character, the reason why there's this whole thing about in Wrath of Khan, and spoiler alert, he doesn't make it. The reason why he plays it so well is because this guy is blinded by rage, the need to avenge his wife Marla, and she was like the anachronistic expert on the Enterprise in the episode Space Seed. So when they get marooned on Ceti Alpha 5, she goes with them. So they end up like, there's a whole thing where they get married, they fall, they love each other and that and stuff. And something happens with Ceti Alpha 6 where it explodes, pushes Ceti Alpha 5 out of its orbit and makes it practically uninhabitable. And as a result, she's killed. So of course he's had 15 wonderful years to build up this juicy revenge plot. But at the same time, he has had no opportunity to grow as a person because everything he knew from his time as one of the genetic supermen back during the eugenics wars, that's all he's got. So Kirk is able to utilize that against him. He utilizes his ego and also his inability to think in 3 dimensions, because on Earth he didn't have to. It was all basically, little plastic men on 2-dimensional maps, so to speak. That's how it worked out. But in space, there's a 3rd dimension you got to think about. And he continued down that tack. He played to the characters. Used the character's weakness as a strength. With Cumberbatch, they took a little bit of a different tack on it insofar as that he was more concerned about the followers that were put into stasis with him and were shot out into space on the Botany Bay. So what they did is they leaned more towards him wanting to protect his family as opposed to him wanting revenge for anything else that happened.
Yeah, and in that sense, it is maybe a little less personal in that sense, at least as far as like between him and Kirk,
right. So it definitely it lessened the impact of these 2 characters coming to loggerheads.
Yeah. What do you think, Will? You have any thoughts on that?
I think
Con who?
Whatever he said.
Yeah. And I agree with him.
No, I think I think I lean towards your position as well, Lars. Like I think of the 2, and obviously the writing and the directing does play a part in that. Like, you as an actor, in the day you can do the best you can with what you're given. But if the writing or the directing is lacking a bit, then it's still going to fall a little bit shorter.
Well, you look at J.J. Abrams was the director of Star Trek Into Darkness, and J.J. Abrams had already previously made it abundantly clear that he was cherry picking what he wanted out of Star Trek fandom to make a movie out of. And I'm not disparaging him as a director. I'm just saying he took the things out of Star Trek he wanted to cherry pick and use to entice a new audience. So they basically threw everything from Star Trek 2 into a blender and then just made a smoothie out of it. And to some people that tasted great, and other people like, why did you put kale in this thing? Like, come on, guys. Like, who are you trying to fool? But and I say this with the absolute utmost respect. Nicholas Meyer directed the 2 best Star Trek original crew movies, that being Wrath of Khan and The Undiscovered Country. And he knew how to take what transpired in a 43-minute episode from the 1960s and bring it into the 1980s and really amp it up. There was real personal investment for Khan. And Into Darkness, there was a personal element to it, but it was so just like you have no investment. You had no investment in any of these characters. You barely had time to even digest and get any kind of attachment to the heroes of the movie.
Yeah, and they're, more fast-paced, obviously more action-oriented, and then you don't have the benefit of having had a series with the actors beforehand where you had time to build that up. And so those were some disadvantages, I guess. And again, not the actor's fault. That's just the way it played out. Whereas with the original series movies and then the TNG movies, you had a whole TV series coming before, so they didn't have to do as much to establish characters and character arcs and such. Although I do love the character arcs in the original series films. Like, honestly, like I think in some way, particularly I guess some of Kirk's journeys, I think, and obviously you have the big three of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, but I think some of the things he goes through, like with the loss of Spock and then the loss of his son, and then obviously, dealing more with the loss of his son in Star Trek 6, which you mentioned. And I guess maybe since you mentioned that, like, could segue into talking about that villain. Have you seen it, Will? Have you seen Star Trek 6? The
Which one was
Undiscovered
that
Country.
one?
It's the one where let's see. You have the Kitamura cores, and then you have, was it the moon explodes?
Yeah,
like
so
Kronos.
Praxis, which was the
Praxis.
Praxis was the moon of Kronos that exploded and basically was wiping out the atmosphere of Kronos. Was the planet was going to become uninhabitable within the next 50 years. So Spock, along with his father, reached out to the Klingon Chancellor, who was Gorkon, to initiate a peace talk, which of course the Klingons had to accept, because basically there was either side with these guys who could help heal our planet, or we're just going to die out. And then, of course, during that, the whole thing, they explored that there are people who just could not wrap their heads around there being everlasting peace between the Klingons and the Federation. And there's a whole, that's the primary plot of the movie, is Kirk and McCoy having to survive being convicted of assassination and also surviving an escape attempt. It's probably one of the coolest whodunits in Star Trek.
Yeah, and I love, at the end, obviously you find out, I believe, there's a General Chang who masterminded it, right? And not necessarily.
He was one of the masterminds.
I don't know if you'd call it a coup d'état so much as, like you said, he was in opposition to the peace accords and wanted to blow that up, I guess, in a sense, like was not in favor of that.
Yeah, there was.
Hey nerds, Richard here, asking you to consider supporting this podcast. If you go to our website, anchor.fm/irreverent nerd, right there on the top of the page is a support button. Click on that, and then you can select the level at which you would like to support us. You can do 99 cents a month, $4.99 a month, or even $9.99 a month. And as I've said before, if you agree to do $9.99 a month, we'll come to your house and give you a hug and a kiss. No, not really. Just kidding. But you will definitely receive our gratitude. So take a minute today to go on there and let us know that you love us, because, we're desperate for that. So just let us know. Thanks, nerds. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Hey guys, sorry about that. I wasn't watching the clock on our Zoom recording here. So, Lars, you got cut off. I'm sorry. I believe we were talking about General Chang and Star Trek 6. So if you remember generally where you left off.
Yeah. So the conspirators, and again, spoiler alert, the conspirators were the Romulan ambassador Nonquist, Admiral Cartwright, Colonel West, whose actor Rene Auberjonois played Odo, the Klingon ambassador, as well as Valeris, who was the Vulcan helm officer aboard Enterprise A, played by Kim Cattrall. Little fun fact:
That's right.
Character, the conspirator, the Federation conspirator, was actually supposed to be Savick. But Robin Curtis, to my knowledge, and perhaps I should hit her up on Facebook and ask her specifically. But I think the reason why she didn't do that is because she didn't feel that Saavik would betray the Federation. So they invented another Vulcan character, Valeris, who ended up taking that role. So the thing is, yeah, I mean, with Star Trek VI, the whole thing is that it's not just about who's the bad guy here. It was a very thick plot, and again, like I said before, it's the greatest whodunit in Star Trek, because when the first time you watched it, I still remember seeing it in a theater. I want to say like 1991.
Sounds about right.
And it was you're sitting there and you're like, it was definitely one of those things where you really had to try to figure out who was doing this, because there was no clear indicator. I mean, of course, yes, there was the tension between there was the Chancellor and his daughter Etzebur. They had Chang, and of course his chief of staff, whose name escapes me right now. I want to say Brigadier Kerlach was his chief of staff. They all knew these.
I'm impressed you remembered all the names you already mentioned.
It doesn't hurt that less than a week ago I watched this very movie.
Oh yes, there you go. There you go then. That does help.
But it wasn't just like this, oh hey, you're a bad guy, I'm a good guy, and that's it. It was you knew Kirk was flawed. His whole feelings towards Klingons were skewed. He even says it, and when he's talking with Spock, like Spock says, this is an unprecedented opportunity, and Kirk's immediate response was, "Don't believe him, don't trust them." He's Jim, they're dying. Let them die. I mean, right there, it's like painting him as the villain in this entire story because he's out for vengeance for the death of David. And so you're thinking, okay, maybe he is, like you're led to believe, maybe there's something to this. But you're like, this is Kirk. He can't be the bad guy. So somebody else has to be up to this. And then you got the bouncing back and forth between him, General Chang, who for some reason is absolutely obsessed with quoting Shakespeare.
I think it's because Christopher Plummer was playing him, and he's if I had to guess, he'd be like, "Hey, I'll do it if I can quote Shakespeare."
Hey, one of the coolest lines in the movie is "Tak be, to be or not to be."
Yeah. Right before he dies, right?
Well, he actually says it the first time when they're having dinner,
right?
Because they're kind of talking about the differences between how the Federation sees rights, and how the Klingons see it. And the thing is, Chekhov says this whole thing about where he's like, we believe that every planet has inalienable human rights, and as Bohr calls him right, he calls his BS right there. It's like, if you could only hear yourself. Inalienable human rights. The very name is racist, and it's like immediately they're just like this. Know that they don't want to be doing this, but at the same time, that there's something deeper at play. The big thing for me, the big shock reveal, was the fact that Valeris was a co-conspirator. Because this whole thing where Spock is like, was his A student. He was absolutely, even says to her in his quarters, I intend for, this will be the last voyage. This will be my last voyage aboard the starship. I intend for you to replace me. And she says, I can only succeed you. So he is bought in. He believes her, that she is it. There's no way that she could ever do anything to harm the Federation. And yet she is the one wielding the knife. And this is where you have really good villain stories, because they're not villains because they're bad guys. They're villains because they're doing what they think is right, but we know it's really wrong.
Yeah, or at the very least, it's in opposition to our heroes. You know what I mean? Like it's going against, like yeah, I like it when they have villains with more complex motives. It's not oh, this person's just bad. It's like no, he has
Yeah.
very personal motive, like with Khan we talked about where, it's the death of his wife and just his desire for revenge. And yeah, I think that always makes for more interesting writing, more interesting villains. And
I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I've always felt that Star Trek has done a phenomenal job of creating villains for their stories that aren't black and white. In motion picture, V'ger wasn't trying to destroy humanity. It just wanted to find its creator.
yeah,
Okay. Of course, Wrath of Khan. I could definitely buy into the fact that if I'd been stranded on some planet and they never came back to check on us and everything goes to hell and I lose the woman who I love, I could buy that. Krug, you can. Krug is a he's a textbook bad guy. He's ambitious and he has bought into this whole Klingon paranoia that the Genesis project is not meant for the creation of life, but it is created to wipe out the Klingon culture. They're convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the Federation has a weapon that's going to destroy the Klingon Empire. In Star Trek 4, most people are like, well, villain? What villain? Well, the villain in that movie is not the probe, it's man's hubris.
mm-hmm.
They hunted a species to extinction to the point where they nearly destroyed the planet. Star Trek 5, it's more metaphysical. Yes, technically Cybok was the bad guy, but the real bad guy in this was the alien on the planet that manipulated him, which led him to do all these these things like which took hostages, stole a starship, tried to turn Kirk's crew against him, including his own half brother, which is Spock. 6, again we just talked about it. 7, the villain was a man not doing something to hurt anybody else. He just wanted to get back where he felt like, or he belonged. He felt he belonged back in the Nexus. He wanted to go there. He didn't care what he had to do and who he had to hurt to get back there. He was singularly focused. 8, we had the Borg, and of course the Borg have been the worst, or not, sorry, excuse me, not the worst, but the scariest bad guys in all of Star Trek. 9, you have people not looking to destroy anybody for the sake of ha ha ha, I'm a bad guy, but because they just want a personal gain. It's all personal gain. And then
Well, I think
10,
there
which
was a
was
bit of with 9 there was a bit of personal vengeance as well, right? Because they had been exiled from the community, I think, had they not? So there was an element of that as well, yeah.
yeah.
But like,
So they had been yes, they had been exiled from the Baku, but again, it was because of hubris. They
mhm.
felt that they shouldn't have laid off technology. They felt they should have continued to embrace it. And then other guys were like, you know what? You saw what it did to our other planet, right? Let's not do that. And of course, Nemesis was again very much a personal vendetta.
Mm.
Also, side note was the movie that nearly killed Tom Hardy's film career.
Really?
Oh
I
yeah,
thought
he became an alcoholic and nearly quit acting because he got so much crap for playing Shinzon.
really.
Yeah,
It's interesting. I thought he did a good job. Like personally, I like his turn as Shinzon, and I think the interplay between him and Picard, I hear so many people rag on that movie, but it had a lot of elements that there it was missing some things for sure. And I don't know that Stuart Baird was the best choice for director given what he had done before. But I liked the dynamic between Shinzon and Picard. I thought that was interesting, and Tom Hardy being an excellent actor as well, even though he was pretty young then. I think maybe 24, 25 at that
yeah,
point.
he was pretty
Um,
young.
I thought he was very commanding presence in that.
I didn't even know Tom Hardy was in a Star Trek.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Star Trek
I'm gonna have to watch
Nemesis.
this now.
Now he does look quite a bit different with his head shaved and like
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, he was much skinnier.
Hmm.
And he was much younger. And of course, they had him in all sorts of makeup and whatnot uh, to help him, to sell the whole thing with him needing an infusion from Picard that would stop his rapid aging. Um, but again, one thing I mean, I could talk ad nauseum about Star Trek, um, and there are so many villains, or characters that play the villain role in the various series and movies, but almost always they're not bad guys for the sake of being bad guys.
Hmm.
They all have some personal motivation. Um, you know, uh, they played a lot of. You mentioned earlier in our pre-discussion about Vildicott.
Hmm.
The Cardassians absolutely despised the Bajorans because they saw them as second-class citizens. They got booted off of Bajor and off Empok Nor um, with they're like, because they had basically this massive pool of slave labor. Suddenly the Federation comes in and boots them. Well, you have these guys who were um, you had these guys who looked down their nose at an entire other race, and suddenly the Federation comes in and saves the day and liberates them. So of course, think about it now. I mean, you think about what it would be like if like I guess an analogy I can use is like during World War II when Nazi Germany invaded and occupied France. They had control of most of the country. Um, Yet, the Allies come in and they liberate this, and suddenly the Nazis go scorched earth on France as they're being pushed out. Same thing, same kind of concept. They literally don't see these people as being allowed to be free. So it makes it easier to hate the guy, but at the same time, the Cardassians proved that during even in the waning days of the Dominion War, that even they had their limits. I mean, uh, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good example, another good example of a bad guy being a bad guy for bad guy's sake, and also there being a redemption arc for his people.
yeah, and like he even, and maybe some of that is like, initially, like earlier on, maybe some reverse Stockholm syndrome in a sense, where I think, because I know he was attracted to Kira, like he liked Kira. I think they play with that storyline. He definitely flirts with her a lot over the course of TS9. But didn't he have a Bajoran lover prior to that? Like prior to them getting kicked off the planet? I was trying to remember.
I
All the
don't
con-
recall exactly, but I do remember um, him. He does actually go through and has cosmetic surgery to make him look like a Bajoran, and he ends up hooking up with Kai Wynn.
Oh yeah. That's right. That's right. Yeah, wasn't it I think the very last episode of the last two episodes, the finale. I forgot
Yeah,
about that.
where he basically gets owned by the Pa race, which were these creatures, these celestial creatures on Bajor, and you know um, he Karma turns out to be a big what.
Oh,
Yeah, and again, like there's so many examples of there being these characters who do bad things, but not for bad reasons. Um, you know, Even like look one of the most defining villains I could think of during TNG was David Warner, playing the Cardassian commander who captures and tortures Picard.
mm-hmm.
There were four lights,
Mm.
and he tortured him to the point where he could literally see more lights than there were.
Yeah,
And of course you got
those were
you have your
intense
fun,
episodes.
yeah, but you also have your fun villains. You have the Harry Muds and the
Hmm.
you know I guess for a lack of a better phrase, the original Klingons. As a song that I very much like refers to them as Puerto Ricans in gold lame. And it's so funny.
It's funny you say that. Will actually, as one of my Christmas gifts, got me a Deep Space Nine comic, and
nice.
In it, there's like 4 or 5 different theories proposed about where the ridges came from and why Klingons ended up with ridges.
Yeah. And but I do like in Enterprise season 4 how they describe or explain how some Klingons lost their ridges.
So they went reverse on that, and from at least from this comic.
They did.
I think this comic was written before that, and it's not canon.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately, the books and the comics, even though they do have some pretty awesome storylines, aren't considered canon. Mind you, the thing is, the series themselves do a really good job of contradicting the other ones anyway, so it doesn't matter. You can. That's the beautiful thing about Star Trek, is it can be whatever you want it to be. Although let's not get into the the eye twitching of like how the Kelvin timeline movies basically, like I said before, blendered all of the original material and just poured it out and said, "Here, drink this." And I know that the topic has kind of, we've grabbed the ship's wheel and just spun it, and we're kind of all over the show, so to speak, about what it is to be a villain in this franchise. But you go back, go back all the way to like the very beginning. I want to say it's like episode 3, maybe, which was Charlie X. Charlie was this creature, so he was a human. He was a survivor on this planet. These aliens raised him, gave him these abilities, but never taught him how to mature. They didn't help him mature into a functional adult. So basically, you had a toddler in an adult's body, wiping people's faces off on the Enterprise. Charlie technically would be classed as a villain of the week, but you still can understand the humanity and what it could take for somebody to end up in this situation. And that's one of the great things that Gene did, is when they had these people writing these stories for the original series. They're like, hey, I want to tell this, I want to say this, I want to show that, and I don't want it to be just another monster of the week kind of show. So they played a lot on social commentary. There's an episode where Frank Gorshin plays an alien whose face is like on one side is white and the other side's black, and he's chasing another alien whose face is white and black, but in the opposite side. And it's a clear-cut case of racism between the two of them, just because one guy is reversed from the other. And yeah, there is no formula for these villains to be just the bad guy. They all come with some backstory that makes them relatable.
Yeah, I was looking down through the another list here. This is from CBR.com, and one of the villains they mentioned that Nerdist did not was Lore from TNG, Data's brother Lore. And with him, obviously he's a machine in a sense, but he has the emotions, and there is definitely an element of like, wow, this being does really seem to be evil on some level. But there's also a bit of jealousy, of his brother. Like he's jealous of his brother, and that, their father, so to speak, favored Data. That he deactivated Lore, but did not do so with Data. So there's still a little bit of that personal element of jealousy there. But yeah, he's definitely. Again, more complicated because he's an android, but like sociopathic at least, if not psychopath.
Oh yeah,
again, it's like like just what he did to the colony there, and the reason he got deactivated, and just
Oh yeah, I mean, Android with daddy issues was definitely an interesting story to explore because it also, without doing so directly, it helped define Data as a sentient life form,
Hmm.
and why his limitations were put into place.
That's true, yeah, and like why he wasn't given emotions and what, and I guess later on, I mean, obviously they probably built on that. I don't know if it was a long-term plan, but like when he gets emotions in Generations, that adds some weight to it. You know, 'cause he's already gone through that with his brother, and you know, he has to even at the end there talk through it again with Jordy of like, you know, should you go through with this? You know, is it a good idea? You know,
I think if I were been Data in Generations, and when he puts the emotion chip in and he's kind of processing, all of the years of his life, I would have gone down to engineering where they kept Lore's body and slam dunked his head into a basket. Like, like you realize what I had to go through because of you. See, huh? And because he had no way to control his emotions, So I mean, just put it in perspective from our side of things. I would have I would have totally screwed with him.
yeah, no, it is yeah, instead of just telling jokes.
Oh yeah,
Or finally
uh,
getting a joke that was told 7 years ago. It's like, I
yeah.
get
The
it.
clown can, yeah, the clown can stay, but the Ferengi suit or the
The Ferengi
Ferengi was it
and Ferengi in
the
the
gorilla
gorilla suit
suit
has to go.
has to go.
Like, I just got it.
But again, you guys, like I said, you make good, and these lists that come out and they show the breakdown of what they consider what's considered a Star Trek villain. There's ton. I mean, there's enough of them to go around that you can play it however you want. But ultimately, I think they do a phenomenal job of putting a human spin on each of these ones to make them completely relatable.
Those are the best villains.
Yeah, and um kind of jumping, I was looking through the list here, and CBR.com has Nero as number 9 on their list. I think something that the film itself, the initial Star Trek film, when with the first in the Kelvin timeline, I think Nero could have been more relatable had they had more backstory. But I just picked up yesterday a copy of Star Trek Countdown, which is basically an official prequel to Star Trek, and they definitely flesh his character out more and his motivations more. I was like,
Is that
wow,
Yeah.
IDW?
I'm sorry.
Is that IDW publisher or?
Yeah, I
Yeah, I think
believe
it
so.
is.
Yeah, IDW. Yeah, and it makes it yeah, they even bring like Picard and Data and Geordi get involved as well. Like, and it's pretty cool
Yeah,
actually.
I
But
think Geordi is actually the one who designs the ship that's called referred to as the jellyfish.
yeah, yeah, he's the one that's his baby, so to speak. That was a cool addition. But yeah, honestly, I wish some of that had been in the actual film, but maybe they
I
didn't want.
wish they had kept the deleted scenes from Star Trek 2009 in the movie because it goes the whole thing. I mean, because you wonder what happened between the time that the Kelvin rammed itself into the Narada and where he shows back up 25 years later. Like, what happened to the guy? We know through the deleted scenes that the majority of the Narada's crew and the ship was captured by the Klingons, and they even allude to that. They're like, hey, is this is this possibly Klingon in origin? They're like, no, you're so far from the Klingon because they were right there. They were right on Klingon space, and they just do this whole thing where through deleted scenes they show that they were captured, they were taken to Rurapente, and they spend 25 years basically plotting their escape. And that also
Mm,
explains, if you look at Nero when he's 25 years later, the tip of one of his ears is missing, and he's got bite marks in his head because they
mm.
actually show a scene where he actually fights with a creature that bites into his head.
Oh, yeah, that definitely should have. I'm gonna have to go back and watch those now. Like those should have been. That would have given more weight to his character.
Absolutely. yeah, it would have made a lot more sense. It just makes a whole lot more sense.
I always wondered what happened those 25 years.
Yeah. I tell you what, like when I was when I was living in New Zealand when that movie came out, and my friends were all like, "Oh, this is gonna suck. This is gonna suck," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's gonna probably suck." And then I started to get more excited. I was like, "You know what? Maybe this isn't so bad." And you saw like the trailers, like with the whole thing with Kurt stealing the Corvette and playing Beastie Boys, and
Oh yeah.
you're like, "Ooh, this could be cool," yeah. And then you're bopping along during the movie, and then suddenly they just take they take a huge left turn, and you're like, "Well, I'm done. I'm out."
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it is directing and how much of it is they just miscast Nero, but yeah, I tend to think the casting may have had a little bit more to do with it. I think they should have cast someone different.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Because most people, if you don't realize where else you saw Eric Bana, he was Hulk, or he was
Yeah.
Bruce. Sorry, it was Bruce Banner in the first Hulk movie.
The bad one.
Bad one.
Yes, the one with Nick Nolte, and the one.
Oh
where,
yeah, I forgot he was in that.
Every time they shot Hulk, he got bigger.
Mutant dogs.
Yeah, that movie.
Oh, yeah.
I finally, like,
Yeah,
I'd been
he's-
avoiding it for years. I finally watched it. I believe it was earlier this year. I was like, yeah, they were all right. This is very
Yes.
bad. And it felt like the director was trying to imitate some of what Sam Raimi had done with Spider-Man and stuff, and it did not work.
Yeah, Ang Lee kind of missed the mark big time.
Yeah, she doesn't do that very often, but with that, he definitely did. Yeah.
Completely off topic, but Hulk is, I don't know. Hulk solo films have not been great.
Oh no, I mean the Incredible Hulk was better than Hulk.
Yes.
That's true.
But
I
he
mean-
didn't really the character didn't really hit his stride until he appeared being portrayed by Mark Ruffalo in the MCU.
Yeah, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, again, we're way off base here, but that's okay. Mark Ruffalo, I think, was in the running, I think, to play in the Incredible Hulk, and I forget why. I may be wrong about that, but I forget why Edward Norton.
I don't know if he was in
getting
the running, but I do know that he ended up getting the role for the MCU version of the Incredible Hulk on recommendation from Edward Norton.
Okay, so Ed just didn't want to do it more than once, and
I'm sure they probably couldn't offer him enough money. And also
that's
Edward
possible.
Norton has a terrible reputation for getting into things he doesn't belong into, to the point where I want to say that the movie he was in, which was one of my favorites, is American History X. He messed with the editing so much that the director sued to get out of his contract. And in the end, basically refused to acknowledge that he even directed the movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's one I have not seen yet. Oh, let's see. Well, we got about 9 minutes left here. So let's see. How should we wrap up here? I guess we talked real briefly about classes. We've talked a lot about specific villains, but I think you had mentioned like the Borg, say, versus the Klingons versus the Romulans versus, was it the Suliban? Was that the ones from season 3 of Enterprise where you have that whole arc with the Suliban like that?
Yeah, the temporal Cold War.
Yeah.
I can't believe we haven't talked about Q. But yeah.
Yeah, Q, definitely Q there as well. And obviously some others from his race come along the way.
If Q was a D&D character, he'd be an arcane trickster. And because the thing is that, remember, anybody who is familiar with the character Q and his whole storyline, including where he goes in season 2 of Picard, he is by far probably one of the least villainy characters in the entire franchise, just because everything he did was to push humanity to achieve it, to be the greatest they could. He loved humanity. He loved Picard, and there's a wonderful, wonderful scene at the end of season 2 of Picard, where apparently I don't know what was going on, but I think somebody was chopping a bunch of onions in my living room when I was watching it. But kind of got the vapors, and it was a very touching moment. But you're right. I mean, I think there are races in Star Trek that are traditionally portrayed as the bad guys. It started off with the Klingons, then it became the Romulans, and then as you went along, through TNG, the Romulans became the big bad guys, and then you had the Breen, and then DS9 you had the Dominion, who were really the bad guys. You had then through Voyager, you had Species 8479 and the Kazon as well. And then
And
of course as you go in, and the Borg, of course. And then you have you went into Enterprise, and again you had like the Suliban, and then later on you had the Zindi. And yeah, I mean, they all get portrayed as bad guys, but they're not just black and white, which is what makes them interesting. Another fun fact, the Ferengi were intended to be the new bad guys for Star Trek, but they looked so silly in The Last Outpost that they knew that there was no way that anybody would take them seriously as a villain.
Oh, and they acted ridiculous too, like just like when you
I like the Ferengi.
no, when you compare the Ferengi from that episode to like say Quark on DS9, it's just so different. They're like animalistic, and they're like growling and stuff, and they got their whips and
yeah, that's right. The funny thing is that one of those Ferengis in The Last Outpost was actually portrayed by Armin Shimmerman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I guess that's probably how he got the role later with DS9. Is he had some experience?
Yeah, he looked good in the makeup.
Yeah. Oh man, I bet he was glad to put that on for the last time when he rapped for DS9.
I'm sure.
Oh man. Well, I guess we should wrap up then. Lars, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being flexible. I know it's not the topic we had prepared for, but
oh, no worries.
I feel like
it's been actually my pleasure sitting here talking to you guys. I could talk about Star Trek until I'm blue in the face, and it's nice to have an open forum to be able to do so.
Oh, absolutely, and we'll definitely have you on again, and at some point, sci-fi is a regular part of our show here. So, and obviously, I love Star Trek, and through this show, like through us doing the show together, I found out that Will had watched Star Trek Run Up.
Yeah.
I never knew that until this past year, and we were doing this podcast together, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I watched all those." I was like,
a refresher wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get to talk about the women of Star Trek sometime in the future.
Yeah, we'll catch up with Holodeck 4, and we'll figure out a recording time and get that one on the books.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm telling you, when I give you my top 5 women in Star Trek, number 1 is going to surprise the hell out of you.
Yeah, I was working on my top 5 earlier. Like I put down, I think 12 different candidates, and I was trying to finalize it. And my number 1 is probably not what a lot of people would expect either. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode. So we'll have to figure that out. So.
Well, thanks guys for having me. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk with other fellow nerds, and what better way to do it than talk to 2 of the most irreverent ones. Yeah, and
roll credits. And we get to talk to one of the oldest ones now.
Oh man! Yeah, I can't.
Old men gaming. Yeah, I will say though, just watch out. Since you're a red shirt geek, just watch out. And if Kirk tries to send you on an away mission, say no.
Hard pass. No thanks, man. You go do it.
Well, yeah. Well, hey, nerds, check out Treknicity and the Red Shirt Geeks and Old Men Gaming on Twitch, all that fun stuff. Like, check them out. I think is YouTube the best place to go? Like, where's the best place for them? Obviously, they can find you on Instagram as well, but like, is there a single place they can go to like connect to all of it, or?
Well, if you want to watch the Treknicity podcast, you can either do it directly through Spotify, or you can go to anchor.fm/Treknicity. You can go to you can go to redshirtgeeks.tv. And of course, you can go to twitch.tv/redshirtgeeks.
Well, there you go. Hey, nerds. So check it out and go support another podcasters here. And yeah, well, we'll see y'all next time, or you'll see us next time. Live long and prosper. Can you do it, Will?
Live long and prosper.
There we go.
Oh, you did it. Look,
two.
Look, even the little man's getting in on it.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Oh, there goes my back.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks
Have a good one.
You too.
And good meeting you.
Same here, Will.
All right, Holodeck 4's top 5 Star Trek villains. Number 1, I have Gul Dukat. Number 2, Nero. Number 3, Borg Queen. Number 4, Kai Wen. And number 5, Shenzhen.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Irreverent Nerds podcast. And a special thank you to Lars Di Senza, both for supporting the podcast as long as he has and for coming on once again to talk about Star Trek. Check out his work. You can find the Treknicity podcast on Spotify. Just look up Treknicity. You can also find it on YouTube. These are the video versions on YouTube. If you go to the Red Shirt Geeks YouTube channel, you will see it as a playlist right there on the front page. So check him out. He's at Photographer. Also, the podcast is at Treknicity, and I believe at Red Shirt Geeks on Instagram. So give him a follow there. And of course, follow us as well. This is our podcast after all. You can find us on Instagram at irreverent_nerds. We are on Facebook, simply The Irreverent Nerds. That's our fan page there. And we are on YouTube as well. And we're publishing videos more often there now. In fact, we just released one today. It was a vidcast of last week's episode about that time I got reincarnated as a slime, the movie Scarlet Bond, and our review of said film. So check that out on YouTube now. If you want to support us, we would really appreciate it. You can go to our anchor.fm profile. That's anchor.fm/irreverent_nerd. There's a button right there that says support. You can do it for as little as 99 cents a month. We would also appreciate it if you did $4.99 or even $9.99 a month. Will, of course, will come and give you a hug and a kiss if you do $9.99 a month. I might even come too. You never know. No, just kidding. It would only be Will. We would greatly appreciate that, though. That would let us know that you value what we're producing each week, and it would help us to cover some of the costs, minimal though they may be, of producing this podcast. So we would be very grateful for that. Until next week, my nerds, live long and prosper. Oh, so I almost forgot to tell you what's coming next week. We are going to be sitting down for an interview with local artist Elijah Miller, who specializes in illustrations, he takes commissions, and is working on his very own graphic novel. Check him out in the meantime on ElijahMillerArt.com or on Instagram at BeTheInfluence_BMSR. That's coming next week on the Irreverent Nerds podcast.